Sejam muito bem-vindos ao canal Sérgio Tavares, hoje com mais uma entrevista internacional com um virologista belga de renome mundial. Falo de Geert Vanden Bossche, que é um dos cientistas mais habilitados do mundo para falar de vírus e para falar especificamente de vacinas, porque participou em campanhas mundiais de vacinação durante mais de 20 anos. Geert Vanden Bossche trabalhou em várias empresas fabricantes de vacinas, como a Glaxo SmithKline, Novartis ou Solvay. Isto antes de passar a integrar a Fundação Bill e Melinda Gates, enquanto diretor sénior de saúde global e desenvolvimento de vacinas. Depois, posteriormente então, trabalhou ainda na GAVI, Aliança Global para Vacinas e Imunização, cujo presidente, como sabemos, é Durão Barroso, ex-primeiro-ministro português e antigo presidente da Comissão Europeia. E então, Geert Vanden Bossche fez também parte ainda do Centro Alemão de Pesquisas em Doenças Infecciosas, entre outras funções que já desempenhou. E atualmente atua como consultor na área de biotecnologia e vacinas. É, portanto, uma autoridade, um expert neste tema vacinas e precisamente por ele ter todo este conhecimento de causa, Geert Vanden Bossche, durante a chamada pandemia Covid, tornou-se mundialmente famoso por vir a público alertar a humanidade para o perigo de se conduzirem programas de vacinação em massa durante a eclosão de uma suposta pandemia. E para isso, ele lançou o livro The Inescapable Immune Escape Pandemic, que traduzido significa qualquer coisa como Pandemia de Fuga Imunológica Sem Controlo. Neste livro, Geert Vanden Bossche expõe também ainda em detalhe as poderosas organizações e empresas farmacêuticas envolvidas em todo este processo. Portanto, imaginem bem o tanto que terá para partilhar connosco Geert Vanden Bossche, que conhece os meandros da GAVI, esteve dentro da Fundação Bill e Melinda Gates, privou com Bill Gates, ou seja, conhece o sistema por dentro. E ele que tem então vindo a alertar o mundo para coisas absolutamente aterradoras que estão a acontecer na Terra, desde que um determinado produto foi dado então em massa à população mundial. E sim, como estão a perceber, eu estou agora a ser comedido aqui no uso de certas palavras. Porquê? Porque esta entrevista está a ser transmitida no YouTube, que é uma plataforma que, como vocês sabem, não permite que se aborde determinados assuntos, não permite que se questionem determinados factos. E por isso mesmo, para contornar essa censura aqui no YouTube, a segunda parte desta entrevista, onde vamos a falar dos assuntos mais sensíveis, essa segunda parte não vai aparecer aqui no YouTube, mas sim continuará depois na versão do X e do Rumble, pois esta é uma transmissão simultânea no YouTube, X e Rumble, mas no YouTube parará a meio e no X e no Rumble continuará então para a segunda parte, para podermos então falar sem censura e onde poderão então assistir à versão integral, sem cortes e a ouvir então todas as explicações sobre os assuntos que o YouTube não permite falar, nomeadamente sobre as vacinas Covid. Encontrarão o link do X e do Rumble com a versão completa aqui na descrição do vídeo, ou então encontrarão estas redes também no site www.canalsergiotavares.pt. Infelizmente, a nova ciência é assim, não permite questionar certas coisas, mesmo que impliquem e que mexam diretamente com a nossa saúde, e então somos obrigados a contornar a censura. Pedimos desculpa aos nossos espectadores aqui no YouTube por assistirem a uma versão mais curta, mas é a única forma de não levar strike e de até esta primeira parte não ser deitada abaixo. Por isso mesmo, vamos então, sem mais demoras, vou adicionar o meu convidado internacional à transmissão numa entrevista que passará então a partir de agora a ser falada em inglês. Hello, Geert. Thank you very much for accepting the invitation for this interview in Portugal. It's a great pleasure to be able to share your knowledge with my audience. Welcome.
Yeah, well, thanks, Sergio, for having me.
Yeah, Geert, as I was saying in Portuguese, in this introduction, this interview is being broadcasted on YouTube, X, and Rumble. But due to censorship on YouTube, only the first more generic part will be broadcasted, while we will leave it for the second part, the most sensitive issues related to vaccination, to COVID virus, to masks. So I will ask you that on this first part, we do not talk about those sensitive topics, vaccination, masks, etc. And on the second part, we can talk about that, okay? Because you know that YouTube makes a lot of censorship. So is that okay to you?
Yeah, well, it's okay. But as a matter of fact, the real science which I'm selling to people, is very susceptible, of course, to censorship, right? So I'll do my best.
Okay. So I will start by asking you about your experience at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. You were Senior Director of Global Health and Vaccine Development. So I'll start to ask you, what is your opinion about Bill Gates?
Yeah, well, Sergio, I can only talk about my opinion that I had like 12 years ago when I left the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So this is quite a long time ago. I had a very good time, very productive time at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. You have to know that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is not run by Bill Gates himself. He has appointed people, CEOs, CEO, directors, etc., who are running the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And but it is true that I had some contacts with Bill Gates himself, and I think Bill Gates is somebody who is extremely driven. His opinions are extremely driven by technologies, by the potential of technologies, and I think somebody like Bill Gates has shown that he excels in terms of demonstrating what technologies can do and the kind of revolution that technologies can bring about. What I do think is that he understands very well technologies, but what he does not understand very well is the biology. And it becomes very tricky when you think, or when one thinks, that you can control biology by technologies, right? And yes. I think with regard to his involvement and support of the COVID-19 vaccines, that is exactly what this illustrates. So, I know people have all kinds of opinions, but you don't hear me say, and I will never say this, that Bill Gates had very bad intentions with supporting these COVID-19 vaccines. I don't believe so. But yes. I do think that he's, of course, very ambitious, and he miscalculated his efforts in thinking that through modern technologies, one would be able to tame a very small organism like a virus, right? And that has been a very profound miscalculation. So technocrats, or people who are, have a strong belief in, paradigm-changing technologies, or they think technologies can change paradigms, and they sometimes can. But as a matter of fact, with regard to biology and complex biological phenomena like a pandemic, for example, it's too simplistic to simply think that you can implement one single technology and solve the whole problem, or in other words, do better than nature itself does by resolving a natural pandemic. we have had many pandemics in the history of, or in the lifetime of humans, and even if since the creation of the world. So these pandemics have all naturally resolved, and that is in fact a magnificent illustration of how evolution works and how evolution maintains a very sound balance between a pathogen and a human population, for example. And simply by implementing massively new technologies like the mRNA vaccines, or for that matter, any of these COVID-19 vaccines that do not curtail transmission and let the virus evolve, thinking that such a technology can simply do better than nature in solving and abrogating a pandemic, was a profound miscalculation. And I think Bill Gates has been part of this miscalculation. So that is what I would say about the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and the people who created this foundation, namely Bill himself and his ex-wife Melinda. Over.
Yes, but what justification do you find for Bill Gates' great obsession with vaccines? Why? What is justification you find?
Well, if you really think about this, then one must say that in terms of intervention in health, vaccines can be extremely impactful, can have a huge impact on thousands, millions of people. There is probably little comparison to other investments in health interventions that have the same return as vaccines do. But of course, it is critical that you implement those vaccines in the correct way. But many medical doctors, for example, have shifted from their business, their practice, their medical practice, to the vaccine business. And the main reason for that, some people will say, because of the money, but not all medical doctors are like this, is because they were convinced that, their efforts would bear more fruit if they would, dedicate their efforts to vaccinology, for example, and that this would have a much larger scale impact on the health of people, on global health, than seeing individual patients, in their practice. So that is also the reason why I think Bill Gates, who has a lot of money, concentrated a lot of his financial efforts, but also intellectual efforts. Don't think that Bill Gates is somebody who is driving around in his Porsche in Seattle. This guy is studying microbiology, immunology, vaccine manufacturing, etc. So I think he was convinced, and probably still convinced, that as well his financial and intellectual efforts would bear most fruit with regard to impact on global health by investing those in vaccines, right? Yeah. And of course, not only in vaccines, but vaccines is of course a major topic at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And I would say back in those days, I easily think that 30 to 50% of the funding was invested in vaccine research.
Yes. But Bill Gates said that what he invested in vaccines gave him financial return 20 times greater. Can you confirm this? That it was
I cannot
so
confirm
profitable?
This. Sergio, I'm a researcher. I'm not interested in financial
profits.
But what I can tell you, which I think is very, very legitimate. The concept of the foundation, and that is certainly a concept that was endorsed or supported by Bill Gates himself, otherwise it would not have become a concept of the foundation, was that, okay, we can invest a lot of money also in the for-profit industry and the for-profit business, so in private companies, provided, and here comes the point, provided that if those technologies would serve global health, that these private companies commit to making the technology available in large enough supply and at affordable cost. So if a company develops a technology that could be promising for developing countries, why would you prevent them from developing this as well for industrialized countries, as long as they commit to make the technology available for developing countries in large enough supply, so they should be able to manufacture it, and if they cannot, they need to outcontract on their cost, etc., at an affordable price. I mean, this is a win-win for both parties. And of course, some of these technologies could be very promising for tackling diseases or health issues in developing in industrialized countries, and hence the return on investment may be enormous. But I don't see any negative aspect in this concept as long as you commit indeed to also helping the other part of the world with these technologies. Yeah.
Yes, but do you agree that the arrival of a pandemic is the best thing that can happen to those who invest so many millions in vaccines?
I don't know, because this is essentially, look, so many companies are investing a lot of money in vaccines, hence only very, very few benefited from the pandemic, so to say. It was essentially those who were manufacturing the mRNA vaccines who benefited. This was the technology that was certainly the fastest and could be rapidly implemented, whereas the more conservative vaccine technologies take more time, more time-consuming, more resource-consuming, and they could not compete. So you will never hear me say, because I simply think if you have worked with these organizations, if you have worked like I did with the vaccine industry, if you have like 30, 35 years of experience in all these fields with all these companies, I mean, for me, it would be a complete nonsense to even share or suggest that a pandemic would be invented, right, for big companies to make huge profits. I mean, the huge profits they expected with these technologies were definitely in the field of cancer, for example, and diseases that are very difficult to treat and where life expectancy is very limited, where you can, in other words, take more risk. Of course, I'm always saying my conclusion of this whole thing is that if you open the door, of course, to Big Pharma, they will take whatever they can, and they will not care about your individual health. They care, of course, about the shareholders and about the benefits of the shareholders. So the one who gives the green light to Big Pharma to play, is the one that is responsible and accountable for any major mistake that is the consequence, for example, of mass vaccination. And for me, the party that has given this green light and that is corrupt at the top and that is completely incompetent is the WHO. So the WHO has given the green light to Big Pharma. And of course, if you have an organization that at the top makes the right decisions and does the right thing, then of course, why should Big Pharma not play? Why shouldn't they have sell all those vaccines? There is nothing wrong with this if this would be the correct health intervention for this particular health issue. that this was not correct. It was a misjudgment, a miscalculation of the WHO. But of course, even though Big Pharma may have realized that this was not the right thing to do, namely doing mass vaccination during a pandemic, if you open the door for them, they will play, because for them it was an opportunity to test those new technologies at large scale, and hence to prepare their platforms for the final target. The final target is to use these platforms initially for therapeutic purposes, like for cancer, where life expectancy is very limited, and then go down to more and more healthy people, to younger and younger people, etc. But this trajectory normally takes a few decades even, right? Now they have gotten the chance, given the chance by the WHO to speed up and expedite this whole thing. And of course, if they have the opportunity to do this, they're not going to say no, of course, right? So it's very complex, Sergio. You have to have, I had an opportunity to look behind the curtains, of course, with working with this organization. So I know to a large extent what is going on and what is the reasoning and how this functions and why an organization like WHO is not the optimal judge for deciding whether or not such massive programs of immunization or even drug treatment, etc., should or should not be implemented, right?
Yeah. I will ask you later about the WHO, but are you aware that, for example, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, together with the World Economic Forum, they made the COVID pandemic simulation in October 2019 in New York. It was the event 201, where they simulated in detail everything that would happen 6 months later. What explanation you find for this kind of crystal ball from Bill Gates Foundation and the World Economic Forum 6 months prior to COVID pandemic?
Yeah. So Sergio, I'm going to tell you something. In my humble opinion, people are right now getting extremely distracted by all these things. When I was voicing my opinion about the mass vaccination about 3 years ago, nobody was talking about this. Now everybody is talking about these things. And to be very honest with you, I think a lot of what we are discovering right now, or what people are now sharing, and I'm asking myself, why didn't they share this 2, 3, 4 years ago? Why didn't they share all this information? A lot of this information looks extremely suspicious. I fully agree with you. I don't have the detail, but I can tell you one thing. This is not today, this is not the priority. The priority today is to tame this virus that is continuing to evolve, that is, right now representing a major threat to human health globally. And that is, should be the absolute priority. Once you have tackled this, there will be plenty of time to dive into all these details. Why was this already, patented, the vaccine, before the outbreak started? Why were the vaccine companies already, like Moderna and Pfizer, developing these vaccines before, so to say, officially the sequence was known? Why were all these scenarios simulated? There is so many questions. What about the origin of the virus? Did it really come from the animals, or has it been, manipulated in the lab, and did it escape from the lab? And there is plenty of questions, but that is distracting from the current priority that nobody cares about, is that the virus is not under control. And, I think, and that is what I'm concentrated on. So please, with all my respect, you can ask me these questions and I will respond to this, but, many of these also, even for me, is suspicious. I'm a researcher. I'm following what the virus is doing. I'm following the interplay between the virus and the immune system. And I can only say the situation right now, although it looks silent in terms of COVID as such. I'm not talking about the side effects. I'm not talking about all the immune pathology and the cancers, etc. I'm talking about acute cases of COVID that require hospitalization, that provoke death in people due to COVID. That is pretty silent right now. But the evolution of the virus under the water surface is enormous. And I can tell you that people who are investigating this very seriously are probably even more anxious or, more afraid than I am that this will explode into a real tsunami, right? And that is what I'm fully concentrated on, because all the other things are very, very important. I fully agree with you, but right now it's not the priority. And I'm just concentrating on the priorities and sitting as you
of course,
on many unresolved questions, of course.
Yeah, I understand, and we will talk about that on the second part. But about the WHO, Bill Gates is one of the main financiers of the WHO, along with the big pharmaceutical companies. In your opinion, don't you think that there is a conflict of interest between entities that sponsor an organization that has the power to proclaim pandemics, and the organizations that that pandemics result on the sale or in the sale of vaccines? So don't you think there is a conflict of interest? They finance that company that proclaims pandemics that result on the sales of vaccines.
Yeah, I fully agree with you, Sergio. But again, there is conflicts of interest all over the place. And I can tell you, even people who are opposing this whole circus and this whole madness have conflicts of interest. There is very, very few people, even on the other side of the lake, and those who are opposing these vaccines, who are opposing these treaties, the WHO, etc., who don't have conflicts of interest. Don't think that these people are not also kind of like, have the ambition to get, an interesting job once the pandemic is over and all these things. So conflicts of interest are all over the place. That is the biggest problem we have. That is the reason why scientists cannot discuss with each other. That is the reason why there is no debate with public health authorities. You cannot sit around the table like myself with my previous colleagues in industry, etc. Almost all people, no matter on which side of the story they are having conflicts of interest. It's the major problem. Yes, I fully agree with you. Like WHO should be completely independent. But as you know, Sergio, the older you get, the more you realize that at the end of the day, it's all about money. It's all about money. Now, the WHO has no money. They has no money. If you get a job at the WHO, your first task is to bring home a project where that will pay you, that will pay your salary. The WHO cannot pay you directly. This will be through the project that you bring on board, for example. They have so no financial means. They have no infrastructure. And then you decide, we are going to do mass vaccination. Where are the vaccines going to come from? The only organization that can make those vaccines in these huge quantities, for example, is Big Pharma. The only guys that can sponsor this is Big Pharma, or guys like, Bill Gates, etc. Many of these multimillionaires are not even thinking of spending one dime on global health or whatever. But then where the money comes together, the conflicts of interest come together as well, right? It's all over the place. I fully agree with you. It's all over the place, the conflicts of interest. And I'm saying this very, very loudly. I'm saying this very, very loudly because, and I consider myself an exception. I can tell you, Sergio, I have no conflict of interest. You can share this broadly and people can verify this. But unfortunately, there is very few people that do have knowledge, that do have insight in what's going on, and don't have any conflicts of interest. So again, why is this? That we are hearing all these dissident voices right now, since only a few months or 1 year approximately. Where have they been? Where were they 3 years ago, for example, right? We didn't hear anybody. There was myself, there was Peter McCullough, there was Robert Malone, there were a few people. Now there is like thousands, right? Why haven't they been speaking up 3 years ago, etc.? Right? It all has to do with, their own position, their own, and I can understand this, right? To some extent, I can understand it's human behavior, right?
Their interests, of course.
Yeah.
And to close this issue about the WHO, can I ask you what is your opinion about the WHO pandemic treaty that will be voted on the next World Health Assembly this month? What is your opinion about that?
Well, Sergio, I mean, I was just thinking this morning that I should share again through social media 5 or 6 videos of mine that have been recorded, I think approximately 1 year ago, where I was clearly sharing my opinion on WHO and their intent to have this treaty signed. Again, this would just be, a shame, a major mistake. Let me be very, very clear. If the WHO were a competent organization, and when I talk about competence, Sergio, I only mean the top of the organizations, because you will know in many of these organizations, whether it is in Big Pharma, whether it is at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, GAVI, UNICEF, WHO, the people doing the real field work, they are like you and me. They are fantastic people, trustworthy people, honest people, people who have the heart at the right place. In 90% of the cases, 90. It's all, when you see corruption, when you see incompetence, it's always at the top of the organizations. That's the case in Big Pharma. That's the case with the church. That's the case with politics, and also with these global health organizations. So what I'm saying is that the top that makes the decisions is incompetent. If they were competent, I mean, I would be glad to sign that treaty, having trust in an organization that can do the right thing for everybody, and especially harmonize all our efforts. How hilarious is this, that the pandemic was treated in different ways depending on the country, right? In Europe, we have that many, every country had its own policies and strategy, ridiculous. So if we could harmonize this would be fantastic. If we would have an overarching organization that takes the right decision based on scientific rationale, based on debate, based on exchanges with scientists, etc., and then takes the lead into this, I mean, it would just be fantastic. There is a new pandemic. You don't have to do all this. You don't have to interview me about, Geert, what do you think, etc. It's all taken care of in a way that we can trust those organizations, that we know they do take the right decisions, they make informed decisions. That is not the case with an organization that is completely dependent financially and infrastructurally, because they don't have, the manufacturing plants or whatever to make the vaccines. They have no infrastructure. They're completely dependent. So signing this, very honestly, for me, is a crime. It's not only stupid, it's a crime, because it is now giving the green light to WHO to double down on their insane
power
public health strategies. And we have had examples. I had an example. I don't want to expand on this, but Ebola was a small crisis, about 8, 9, or even 10 years ago in West Africa, where they make also unforgivable mistakes, right? So this organization, empowering this organization is a crime. That is very clear to me.
Yeah, I agree. Geert, I was reporting this year in Davos at the Global Economic Forum, and I saw Tedros Adhanom, the Director General of the WHO, and he insisted a lot on the disease X, a disease that does not yet exist, but which vaccines are already being prepared. Can I ask you, how is this possible to predict vaccines for things that don't exist?
Yeah, well, what they do, all these organizations, they have a list of the most threatening bugs that could provoke major global health issues. So Ebola is on this list, Lassa fever is on this list, dengue, chikungunya. There is, many different especially viruses on this list, and these organizations, they then fund, of course, a number of proposals that are tackling these candidates. And of course, if they talk about disease X, they cannot say whether this will be another bat virus, bat with T, from the bats, or whether it will be another zoonosis or another virus or bacterium that is transmitted, for example, by arthropods, by insects. But they have this list of 10 more candidates, but those who are in the top 10, those are the projects that they fund and that they think will very likely cause another major health issue in the coming years. And of course, all this is linked to, so to say, climate change, to deforestation, urbanization in those developing countries when the humans move more closely to the habitats of wild animals, for example. So that makes some sense. There is a certain logic in this. This is one thing. The other thing is that when you look what's going on right now, there is indeed more threat, so to say. I mean, the threat of the pandemic, of the avian flu, the bird flu, I mean, it's pretty real. We see many cases, not in humans, luckily enough, but in animals. Then you have like dengue spreading. You have other diseases like, for example, monkeypox, etc., that are expanding. So there is a number of signs that seem to indicate to WHO that something else is popping up. However, Sergio, what they forget is that when you massively intervene in the immunity of large populations, right, by vaccinating like millions of people in dozens of countries, and when this immunization program is not correct and that you start to derail the immune system, you shouldn't be surprised that these highly vaccinated populations have a weakened resistance and weakened immunity also towards other diseases that they were previously coping with, right, and dealing with pretty successfully. And so that is also the reason, for example, everybody understands if you weaken, for example, T-cell immunity, that cancers can pop up, for example, right? But this is also the case for infectious diseases. There is certain infectious diseases our immune system can very well fight them off successfully. But if the immune system gets derailed and weakened, many other diseases may pop up. And that is what we have seen over the last 2 years. So yeah, their disease X is not one or the other. They don't know really which one it will be, but for sure they have some candidates. And I think those candidates are now also in the pipeline for mRNA vaccines, for example. Why not?
Yes.
So, that's how they think.
Yes, so let's go for the second part to talk about immunity and vaccines without censorship. So now we are done with this interview on YouTube. So you can continue watch the second part on the X, on the channel X. You can find the link on the description of this video. So now we are going to talk about vaccines, about boosters and everything. So Geert, you are one of the world's greatest experts on vaccines. I remember that you worked on the GAVI, the Global Alliance for Vaccines. As we talked before, you worked on Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. You also work on several pharmaceutical companies. So it's time now to understand everything about the vaccines and about the COVID pandemic. So for you that are watching us here, go to X. Now we'll start the second part.